Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Education Matters with Jim O'Connell. Happy to have you on board. It is October the 16th as we breeze through the year here. If you're watching this on Tuesday at 6 p.m., then you're watching live. The program is repeated at other times during the week. The call-in number is 603-640-3091. So you're very welcome, as always, to call in 640-3091, and whatever it is that you might have to share. I'm very happy to hear it, and those of you who listen to the show regularly will know that not everybody who calls in will always agree with me, and that's fine, because it would be a strange world if everybody did. Well, let me just start with just a few things that are going on. My usual, the stuff that's on the mansd.org website is always a good place to go to get some information. But there are a number of things. The superintendent's visits to our schools continue. The next one's actually, it's a little bit out. It's November 7th, so the day after the elections. It's at 7:30 in the morning at Parker Varney, and then November 8th at Memorial High School at 4:30 in the afternoon. Also, there are a series of equity meetings happening. Some of them have happened already. It's Educational Equity Forum, and there was one over at the Manchester School of Technology held already, and then there's one on Wednesday the 24th, which is a week from tomorrow, and this one's at West High School, and it's on at 6 p.m. And the purpose of these equity meetings, and there are a lot of meetings going on in our city right now, a lot of outreach to parents. We have Dr. Vargas's outreach that I mentioned earlier on, which is usually it's every 2 weeks, but there's a skip now for 3 weeks. But there's also the parental involvement group that has been set up as a subcommittee and continues its work. There's the work of Manchester Proud, which is this community and business organisation which is out doing community outreach in many different ways. Part of it is a canvas that they conduct, and if you go on their website, you can Google Manchester Proud. Don't make the mistake I make regularly when I call it Manchester Pride, but Manchester Proud, and this is a non-partisan, a non-party community effort led by a group of business people and other community leaders who are seeking to recognizing that there are challenges in our school district and seeking to energize people around the idea of deciding how best to lead our education in this city into the future. I'd encourage you to get involved. That's one of the many things, and I'll get back to that in a minute. And then we have, besides the regular TikTok every day, every month opportunities that there are for people to involve themselves in their local PTA, PTG, PTO, whatever you want to call it. If you're within the circle, so to speak, there's a lot of people take umbrage when you call something a parent-teacher organization when it's a parent organization or a parent-teacher group or whatever. For me, the name never really mattered. I know there are little differences between one and the other. Some groups require a membership that you pay. It's minimal. Maybe it's $5 or something, maybe 10 for an annual membership, and most of them do not require a subscription. But one can get wrapped up in the issue of PTG, PTO, PTA, PT, whatever else, and whatever it is, most schools have them. Probably just notionally 50% of the schools in our district, and we have 21, 22 schools, don't have very robust parent organizations for one reason or another. And they often have one or two people who are trying to do everything, or three or four. The exception are the schools where there are 20 or people showing up once a month for meetings and involving themselves in school activities. So I have great sympathy for the idea of parental involvement. I think it's important. I think that the more that parents are involved in their school, especially in the younger years, it's very important at any time. But in younger years, in elementary schools, I think there's a lot of things that parents can be doing, and being involved in their school is very helpful. My pet thing was always middle school as my kids were growing up, because middle school is the place where there's just a lot of stuff going on in your kids' lives, and it's also the transition period between the time that your kids depend on you totally, and there's complete transparency. Little Mary or little Johnny comes home, and they bring their weekly envelope, whatever it is, and both outside of school and in their lives and in school, life gets a little more complicated for a 6th, 7th, or 8th grader. And just my personal belief is there's a time for parents to pay the most attention. I also think it's important not to err into the area of becoming a helicopter parent. There are parents who, who just don't understand that as children grow up, they need some autonomy. And it's kind of painful, actually, once young people get to high school and it's still your darling kid, but, they're growing up, and there is a process. Once they hit high school, it would be kind of strange if they were depending on mom and dad for their everyday decisions, etc., etc. And I've seen, I don't claim expertise, but I've seen people who simply don't allow their children the freedom and the autonomy that they need to make decisions, and then they find themselves, both the parents and the child, or young adult by then, find themselves at 17 and a half with a young person who is not equipped to make the best decisions at the very time that they possibly are going to leave home, head out into the big bad world out there, and end up making significant errors when mom and dad are no longer hovering over their shoulders. So there's an important process that goes on through as kids slowly sort of divest themselves of the this connection to tight connection to parents. I think also psychologically it's probably a very good thing, because we all know as parents what it's like to drop off a child on the first day of school, the first day of the first year in school, and it's exciting, and but it's also such a traumatic thing. And for many parents, the good news for people who haven't been through it and whatever is that the kids, at least the vast majority of them, 99-point-something%, they're kind of fine with it after the first day, if not the second day. Parents have a little bit of separation anxiety. When that separation anxiety is still going on into middle school, I guess we've got a bit of a problem. But and I still see it, and I see it in social settings. I see it in sporting settings where parents just can't back off and let the kids play, and they're shouting at their kid, they're shouting at the kid that the kid is playing against, and they're shouting at the coach, and they're shouting at the referee. I just came right now from watching a middle school basketball game, which was fun to watch. Sorry, not basketball, it was volleyball. A middle school volleyball game this afternoon, and I watched about 10 minutes of it, and it was just fun to watch. And but right in that one room, all the dynamics were apparent, where one dad was on the bleachers and shouting instructions, not just to the. He wasn't screaming and out of order, I think, but he simply didn't realize that everybody else sitting on those bleachers, some of them might know a little bit more about volleyball than he did, and some knew a lot less than he did. But he was insisting that, his view would be heard, I guess, or he's just lack of self-awareness has him doing this. But I'm thinking his poor kid playing on that basketball court, or volleyball court in this case, it wasn't a very crowded place, so sound carried and could be heard. And I picture this, it was girls' volleyball, and I picture this girl of whatever she might have been, it's middle school, so maybe 10, 11, maybe 12, 12-year-old, and there's dad, asking questions of the crowd, sort of, so to speak. How could she miss that? Not about his own kid, maybe, but of others. And I just thought it was all. Anyway, I don't want to go on that, but parents are just so. Some parents, you need to get a grip here and let your kids be kids. Let them make some mistakes, and it's great if they can make those mistakes while still under your roof and under your influence, and then they are fully prepared. And it's a very great moment when one can take pride in looking at your kid as a young adult in high school, and of course take all the credit you want for what you might have done as a parent, but ultimately most of the credit goes to the young person themselves. And if somehow you think that this is the person that I've molded, then you probably should have gotten yourself a doll or something, or something else. Even a puppy, perhaps, you can't really claim to have complete control of it. But I think the relationship is a little kinked with some people. So, in any case, there's lots of opportunity for parental involvement, and people should do more of it. I worry that from going to quite a few meetings, it ends up with the same half dozen. I was going to say dozen, but it's never that many at many of these meetings, and it's the same small group of people. Now, if you go on social media, there is no better place to see sort of dysfunctionality run amok in maybe society writ large, but certainly here in Manchester, than to go on one of the many Facebook chat pages around Manchester schools. And I don't want to sound superior or feeling superior or knowing more than others or holier than thou or whatever. I don't want to come across like that, but just I have to tell you that when you go on these chat rooms, and it is amazing the amount of ignorance that is displayed there. Now, some of the ignorance is, it appalls me that public representatives on a school chat line, and it happened today, for instance, to a candidate, somebody who's a candidate for office, who's on a public forum using the what's colloquially known as the F-bomb, not to talk about anything that he was particularly worked up and angry about, just throwing it out gratuitously as sort of this is a standard way of talking. And it reminds me of the Trumpian thing about grab him by the whatever, and we're all supposed to think that's just locker room talk, and that's how people talk. And I don't want to waste my time talking about that topic or anything else, but I'm just saying that there is a free. I think it's appalling. I'm no prude. But I have to tell you, I think it's appalling that people running for public office and people in public office will go on social media, open forum chat rooms where many constituents and people, and young and old and middle-aged, may be viewing this stuff. And they put out their defence or something, or their argument for something, or their comment on something by using these words. And I find it appalling. I think it's unworthy of our city. It's unworthy of our public office. I worry about the deterioration in the conversation and the way that it gets. I think we're lucky that many of our public representatives, perhaps I might disagree with many of them, but they conduct themselves with an element of decorum. But we have a growing number of people in our city who don't have the restraint to not use foul language or besides the fact that they may attack people. I'm just talking about not in the heat of the moment. I don't think it's forgivable in the heat of the moment either. But we saw a gentleman in the Nashua school board last week who was described by the chair as acting in a childlike manner. And picture this, ladies and gentlemen, this gentleman who was elected, and in the case of Nashua, it's a 4-year term, which by the way, I'm not particularly against 4-year terms, but this gentleman got down on his hands and knees and he said, so if you think I'm behaving like a child, let me show you what behaving like a child is. So at a public meeting of the board of the school board, he gets down on his hands and knees and he starts bleating like a sheep and crying like a baby and talking baby talk and wandering around the floor of the chamber. Frankly, I don't know how we've gotten to a point in America, in the state of New Hampshire, or in one of our cities like Nashua, where that kind of behaviour is acceptable. And thankfully, we haven't reached that point in Manchester, but we have got public representatives who simply. I'm not interested in holier than thou sort of people who are very proper, but their actions are nasty or something. I'm not looking for false goodness. I just think that in order to, when people respect each other, that there's a right way of behaving and not. And using foul language on social websites is not right. The other thing, though, that talk about parental involvement, etc., is whenever these issues come up on social media, when I talk about the ignorance, I wasn't using it in a pejorative sense. I was just using it as, people just don't know what they're talking about. And the amount of bad information that is shared, and then one misconception is compounded by the next misconception, and people go off down these lengthy discussions with each other based on a completely false premise. If I were to say tomorrow that there's a proposal, if I invented here tonight, there's a proposal to build a new high school on Hackett Hill, and we're going to raise taxes by 10% in order to build this new high school, and Memorial and Central and West are closing down. The kids from West are going to be taught at the high school in Bedford, and we're going to pay for that, and it'll be cheaper than doing it ourselves. And we're going to build a new high school in Hackett Hill. Let's just suppose I were to do that, which is all I just made this up right now, just in case there's anybody listening and thinking. So that kind of stuff goes on social media, and then you have a discussion ensues, not about whether the idea is good or not, but it's taken as they're actually going to do this. And then you get the whole they people. They need to do this, and they need to do this. And anyway, it's just very frustrating. I think anybody who was looking at the Union Leader had an online forum. At the end of every article, you were able to log in and make comments. And then there came a time when you had to register at least first, or sign up, and then you could leave comments. They did that because of the level of the atrocious behaviour and the personal attacks, etc., that were happening there. And eventually they did what I think is the right thing, and they shut the thing down. And because it ended up with the same dozen people screaming at each other. And if you go on social media today, if that's your source of information, it's a lousy source of information, because I could take it from me that most of what's on there with regarding education in Manchester is just garbage. And the fact that some school board members are associated with some of these sites and allow this stuff to continue. I mean, I'm not in favour of censorship or anything, but if you're actually managing something, I think you need to take some responsibility for it and correct people when they're fully wrong. The other thing on these social media sites is that people come on and they ask questions that or say things that have happened that they're concerned about, and when challenged, they have not addressed it with the teacher, they haven't addressed it with a principal or an assistant principal, they haven't escalated it to the superintendent or to the district office or the person in charge of the district office, and and sometimes they'll choose to go to a board member, and now we've got it's something that could have been sort of nipped in the bud. And I find it just annoys me, especially I find this when I watch school board meetings or attend school board meetings, and I listen to school board members raising topics and asking things, and I feel like, within my head certainly screaming, but I feel like, from watching on TV, I feel like screaming at the TV. I actually don't indulge myself, but I feel like it. Why didn't you ask this question of the of the superintendent sometime in the last 2 weeks or month since the last meeting. Why are you coming in here, Mr. or Mrs. School Board Member, tonight to ask this this question that could have been answered by email? Unless you're Art Beaudry, you don't do email. But anyway, that's my rant about that. Back to parental involvement. I was going to say the Equity Forum is it describes itself this way. It says that, and so the next one is on Wednesday, October the 24th, which is 8 days from today. And as I said that, my screen went dark. And this one's on at West High School. And actually, on that night of the 24th at 6 p.m., there's actually a community dinner there if you're on the west side. And what's nice about this meeting is that, different from the others, there's one on at Memorial High School on the 29th at 5:15 p.m. and there was one on at MST prior to that. But at West High School, they're doing something which is great, and that is that they're including the 8th grade students. So it says West students, Parkside grade 8 students and their families to come together at West High School at 6 p.m. on the October the 24th to discuss these issues. And I said to the principal of Parkside last week when we met, I said to him that I thought the idea of the 8th grade students at his school being included in a conversation about West was a wonderful thing. He wasn't directly aware of it at that moment, and it was pretty new at that time, but I think it's a great idea and a lesson that could be learned from the other schools. I think this issue about vertical integration, by that I mean that now that we have got a feeder system designed where when a kid goes to this elementary school, they're going to go to this middle school and on to that high school. And so there should be some sort of continuum of knowledge and education and guidance and understanding of a kid. So rather than a bunch of fresh-faced kids arriving into, say, middle school for 6th grade, that some of their information, I mean, the actual packages go with, their academics and stuff go with them, but some more information, there'll be some. And so I think this is a wonderful effort at that. But the effort for this equity meetings is, it says that we want to hear from you. All students, parents, teachers and community members are invited to join us. Manchester Equity Education is an initiative to ensure the equitable success of all students in the Manchester School District. Led by an innovative and collaborative team, this includes our staff, community representative, parents and students. Our goal is to close gaps so that more students graduate prepared to transition to college and careers without the need for remedial courses. So I leave that stand sort of as it is. It's another opportunity on Wednesday the 24th at 6 p.m., especially if you're on the west side, but it's open to anybody, to go and talk about equity issues. And there are equity issues in our schools, which becomes a very sore subject for some people. But clearly, it is a matter of concern that the dropout rate, for instance, depending on people's economic circumstances, their social circumstances, their race, their immigration status, their whatever, all of these things directly affect how people. How well they do or don't do in our public school system. And again, a school system can't fix the society, and it would be silly for a school system to try to fix all the ills of society, kind of thing. At the same time, what a school district should be doing is attempting to educate, give an education to appropriate education to kids to help them to become productive adults in our society, and whatever that may mean. I agree with this idea that not everybody is destined to go to college, but I'm very suspicious of it. But I do support it, but it's not a simple topic because nationally the argument that not everybody is destined to go to college has got undertones to it that say that we don't have to. If it's true that preparing a kid to go to college means that they've got the most rounded and in-depth education in terms of English language skills, grammar skills, writing skills, critical thinking skills, mathematical skills, science and technology skills, and social science skills. If that's actually what preparing a kid to go to college is, then what else is there? It's a different thing to say that not all kids are going to want to go to college, and not all kids are going to want to or like or be good at all of those things I just mentioned. I think few kids can excel, actually. Very few kids can excel at those various topics. I had a disagreement with a school board member over the last year or so who is rightfully pushing the idea of trades and vocational training and job training, etc., which I'm all for, but I think my position is mistaken sometimes, because the point that was lost in my conversation with this school board member was my claim was saying that a certain kid, training kids for the trades, for instance, that's great, because being a tradesman is an honourable vocation, and the average tradesman in New Hampshire today makes $75,000 a year. And the average age of a tradesman in the state of New Hampshire is 51 or 52 years old. So there's a need for tradesmen, there's an opportunity for tradesmen, and you can have, if the average income for a qualified tradesperson in New Hampshire is 75,000, well then that means some are below 75,000, but it means just as many are above 75,000. I think that's a handsome reward for any career, and one can. I have friends who are tradespeople who've had wonderful lives and etc. because of it. So I'm not denigrating in any way. I met a young man on Saturday who graduated with my son a year and a half ago, and he's gone on to he's been with the Air National Guard, and I'd like to congratulate him. His name is Eric Allard, a wonderful young man who I've known through school and through the soccer program. He was a fine soccer player, and Eric has gone to the Air National Guard and to the Fire Academy in Concord, and is where he is right now in regard to this. I know that he's doing his service, and he's also I don't know if he's signed up with a particular fire department yet, but he's on the road to doing that, and he's less than 18 months or 15 months out of school. So congratulations to him. He graduated the academy in Concord recently, or over the summer. But we all know people who are firefighters or police officers or whatever so there's places for everybody. My argument with this, and those are fine careers, my argument with the gentleman around this thing had to do with, because someone chooses to be a firefighter doesn't mean, or to be a plumber, that doesn't mean that they necessarily, first of all, they don't have to be interested in philosophy and political science and astronomy, but they might be. It's the person on the other side of the argument who's saying, well, not everybody's ready for college, and therefore they should learn a trade, and they learn better that way or something. That's all, But who says they don't need an education? How insulting is that? And I'm sure the gentleman I'm referring to wasn't trying to be insulting at all. I think he was just missing my point. How insulting is it to presume that a young man or woman who wants to be a beautician or a barber or a carpenter or an iron worker is not interested in poetry or English literature or science or other such pursuits. Maybe they're interested in robotics. Maybe they're interested in chess. I don't know. But this idea that we don't have to lift everybody to sort of a height that gets them ready to go to university or college, so that the implication is we'll lower the bar. And I find that sort of, I don't objectionable and say people are deliberate. But there are people, make no mistake about it, there are people in the United States nationally who are using an argument about not preparing everybody for college as a way to not actually give young people in public schools the best and most appropriate education that they can give. So it's not about we have gifted and talented programs for our kids, which we don't have in Manchester, though we have them in many other cities in the state, and we've got the largest group of students in the state, but we don't have a gifted and talented program. So the people who say, not everybody's ready for college and all the rest, well, what about getting some people ready for college? Why are we stripping those assets out? We should be able to do that at the same time as doing the wonderful program that's going ahead over at Parkside with the building trades, the effort with Velcro at West High School, and other efforts that are going on. I just think that when the people who are arguing for this effort are not willing to argue for the kids who actually want to go to university to have the things they have, that's where it bothers me, and I find it reminds me of an argument back where I came from in Ireland from 40 years ago, where people who at that time there were people arguing that. Because in the 1970s, until we got to the 1980s, jobs were scarce in Ireland and people left, etc. And the argument was, why are we teaching kids science and technology, for instance, when most of the jobs we have are in farming and tourism? So let's train them to be farmers. And luckily, that argument didn't hold weight, and as a result, we have the talented companies and people working in them that we have in Ireland today. So again, I think that the problem with talking, no, I think it's good that we should talk about different methods of learning, different talents, different types of talents, different pathways to success. I think about it, by the way, I think about a police officer who I happen to know who just retired from the Manchester Police Department about a year ago or so ago, and I'd known this man for a little while, and we would sit and talk. Our sons played sports together, and so we'd sit and talk, and I was blown away by the fact, I don't know why I would be, it's kind of comments on me maybe, but this gentleman in particular had a encyclopedic knowledge of great literature and not just great literature, but modern fiction, historical fiction, classics, everything from the Greek classics through to the most recent writers in various genres. So he was a very well-read man. This guy could have taught English literature at any college in the state. So he's a police officer. He started off, I'm sure, directing traffic and on patrol around the cities of Manchester, or some of the streets of Manchester, and went on to do other things. But there you go. So this presumption that tradespeople, that we don't need to, it just troubles me. I want to switch horses here because I have the issue of the teachers and the teachers' contract and what's going on with the teachers' contract is bothering me a lot. And as many of you will know, I am a strong supporter of public education and of public teachers. I think it's clear that they're underpaid, that they're undervalued. That the amount of effort that they put in is they're not compensated for it. And we're seeing the results in that we can't find paraprofessionals, we don't have enough substitute teachers, and we have teachers leaving our district. And it bothers me a lot because for years, when I talked about the least well funded school system in the state and the highest number of pupil-teacher ratio, with in other words, the highest number of children per class in the state. When people couldn't argue on those two things, people often said, well, they still have it cushy because our teachers, if they didn't, they'd be leaving, or we wouldn't be able to get people to work in our city. Well, both of those things are now happening. We're not able to get people to work in our city in some teaching positions, and by the way, that's after we've gone to the bottom of the pool. So by the time you get to the place, if you just pay attention to this, by the time you get to the place where you can't find somebody to take a vacant position in the school district, that presumes that you've gone as far down to the bottom of the bucket as you're willing to go. However desperate you are might drive you further down into the bucket. So clearly, at that stage, you're no longer capturing the cream of the crop. You're not capturing the most talented and best of potential teachers and employees available on the market. So I don't mean it's always the case, because you may find a teacher, because they have lots of experience and have been around a lot of time, that they're more expensive than others, and a district somewhere might be reticent to employ them because they'd be more expensive than somebody else. So, but generally speaking, I think the case can be made that they are not compensated well or properly for the work they do. I thought it was incredible when I was watching I was at the last Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting, and at that meeting, they talked about that they were reaching agreement with other groups in the city, and I'm fine with that. But it seemed to me that we have the largest number of employees in the city who are working without a contract, who are not getting the pay that they had agreed to, which is their steps, for instance. They're getting no cost of living increase, which is their COLAs, and so there they are working, and we're not responding. And when we got to the last school board meeting, it was incredible to me to listen to the fact that the school district had found the money and put it aside for various groups and others. So the money was found for a potential increase that might come for the nurses, and I think they're deserving of it. There was money set aside. There was money set aside for a number of things. Now, it's short money because it doesn't represent 1,000+ teachers, and so it's easier to find $200,000 than it is to find $2 million. But the fact is, it was found. And likewise, when you go to the Board of Mayor and Alderman, there's an ability to find $100,000 here or $200,000 there. Here's my main point. It is a fundamental failure of the Board of Mayor and Alderman in particular, but of the school board also, that the 14 school board members and the 14 members of the school of the Board of Mayor and Alderman, as well as our mayor, that those 29 people between them ran numbers, proposed, seconded, and passed budgets, first through the school district and then through the Board of Mayor and Alderman, that did not match the needs of the city for the year. So besides my bigger point, which is that we're not supplying we're not funding the school system properly in the first place, but to sit there today as a member of the Board of Mayor and Alderman, all stripes, all sizes, all everything, the fact is that I don't remember, and I'm sorry if I'm doing anybody a disservice, I don't remember anybody pounding their fist, either physically or metaphorically, on the desk and saying, how are we passing this budget? Our teachers there's no money in here to pay the commitments we already have to our school teachers under the STEP program, and there's no cost of living increase for our teachers. And by the way, if there isn't a cost of living increase, by definition, then teachers are being asked to work for less. I think it's a failure. If this was a management team, in this case, that might be the board, the school board. They should be proposing a budget to the board of mayor and aldermen that would actually fund what they believe the teachers' salaries and benefits are actually going to cost the city. The fact that they didn't is a mark against them, and then the fact that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen didn't pass a sufficient budget is a mark again. It's a fundamental failure. We don't elect public representatives to go over to City Hall and sit there. We're grateful for all the work they do, and they put in time, and they are in the seats, but they're not getting paid to sit in the seat. They're getting paid to actually do the work. And the work implies, each one of us as individuals is not running the budget for the city and finding the numbers and where they are. It behooves them, it's their duty to actually fund the programs on the city and run the city properly. And part of running the city properly is to fund it properly. And if you're not able to fund something, then you need to find a way of explain to the people why you're not going to fund it. You just need to be braver and better than you're being. So I think it's a failure of leadership. I'm sorry to say, starting with the mayor and down from there, it's a failure that our public representatives cannot put forward a budget that actually funds the city in the way in which it needs to. And I understand the angst that's going on between the negotiation committee from the school board and the MEA, the teachers union in Manchester, and their I don't know where they are with regard to their discussions. There were no discussions going on most recently, unless something has changed. But the whole thing is a farce anyway, because there is no. I mean, if they were discussing if they were discussing an agreement to come into effect in the next financial year, so starting with the school year starting in September, then that should really be, next September, 10 months away, because that should be the premise of the discussion. And then the people who didn't fund it should be, who didn't have the budget in place, they should be held to account. I think it's just that failure is appalling to me, and that we're willing to accept it. And yet the conversation goes on. I listen to people talking about, there should be discussions about other things, and let's talk about conditions and work practices and all that stuff. Yes, I think that's all part of any contract, but the first part of the contract is to pay the people for the work that they do. And to give an example of just on today's Union Leader, there's a piece about some teacher from, I've forgotten already, but I think it was, let me see, it was from Salem. It says, it was a teacher, there was a piece on Even TV about it last week, where this teacher from Salem had a little toddler daughter who he put into one of these machines at the mall or at some centre, where the arm comes down and picks a prize of some kind, a soft toy or whatever, and he had his little toddler go in through the hole, and they were able to climb inside and grab the stuff and pass it out. So police were looking for him. It turns out that he's a teacher in Salem. So what a weird thing to be doing. First of all, teacher man, like, what are you you're just teaching your own daughter how to be a thief. Anyway, who am I to judge? But the point it says on today's paper, for instance, right here, it says an $85,000 a year teacher fled his school when confronted by police last month. Now, the highest paid teacher, if you've been a teacher for 14 years, in Manchester, the highest paid teacher is 75,000. It might be 76. I don't know if I'm accounting for the last increase. So I don't like to give inaccurate information, but I'm fairly sure it's 75, and I'm sure someone can call me if I'm off by too much. But right there, so that's a $10,000 difference, and it doesn't say that one of the most highly paid teachers in Salem Salem, New Hampshire, it says a Salem, New Hampshire teacher on $85,000 a year. So $10,000. Think about that as a percentage of 75,000, right? That's a whatever, close to 15% difference, 12.5% difference. So someone can do the math at home, but and that would be, he's getting paid that, and we don't know whether he's been there 3 years or not. But the most senior teachers in Manchester could never get even close to that. So I am I find it appalling that that teachers in Manchester are being treated with the disrespect with which they're being treated by our public representatives, and they have no place to hide. My friends, my closest friends on the board of Mayor and Aldermen and on the school board, they all ought to be rather than saying, we don't have the money. I had a teacher say to me last week, who said to me, well, they just don't have the money. Like, they decided what to do with the money that they have. In Manchester, as a percentage, in most cities, if you look at a pie chart of city spending and school spending, and then compare it to Manchester, you'll see that on the Manchester side, we spend a less proportion of our total revenues on schools than other towns do. So besides the fact that we spend less than everybody else per capita, besides the fact that we don't pay our teachers the state average, and besides the fact that we have more children in a class than everybody else, we also, as a percentage of city revenues, spend a smaller proportion of our total revenues on schools than comparable cities do. So there's no excuse, ladies and gentlemen, if you're sitting there and our board of mayor and aldermen, who ultimately have control of this, historically have done a lousy job of funding Manchester schools, and it's being continued now. And I was hoping for a new day and a better day once we elected Mayor Joyce Craig. I understand that she has to live. Her argument, I think, in her defence would be that she can only do what the school board will let her do, or the board of mayor and aldermen will let him do. Well, I think that excuse applied to Mayor Ted Gatsas as well. And frankly, it doesn't wash with me. I understand it, but I don't. The fact that I understand it doesn't make it right. I understand why 16-year-olds are insured, cost more for car insurance than 45-year-olds because they drive faster and they're left safe. I understand it. I'm not agreeing with it. I'm not saying, well, then, fine. You're 17, so you're allowed to drive over the speed limit and go rushing through neighbourhoods faster than you should. And likewise, the mayor and members of the board, mayor and aldermen, don't get excused for underfunding our public school system. The very least they need to do is be standing at the podium, bouncing the gavel until it's in smithereens, and saying this is unfair to the people of the city of Manchester. Now, I have to say this. Something else has come to light with regard to the teacher contract and teachers' compensation in Manchester. Now, I know I often hear from my friend Phil Sapienza, who has, I'm very grateful that he's called into the show a number of times, and he certainly has pointed out the issue about school board members taking health benefits, especially, and board of mayor and alderman members taking health benefits, especially those who are earning substantial amounts of money or who are apparently wealthy. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But anyway, I don't have their tax returns. But people who are pretty wealthy, who are taking health benefits from the school district or from the board of mayor and alderman, while the children in this city, many of them do not have the services they deserve. That is immoral, and it should be stopped. And so that I support 100%. But I have to say that I started by talking about how I'm a supporter of teachers, and I think teachers deserve to be compensated properly for the work that they do. But something that's come to light is this. I was watching the last school board meeting, and one of the members of the MEA, Maxine Mosley, who came to the podium and in public session and asked about grievances or some complaints that the MEA had made against some administrators in Manchester. So that's the first I'd heard of it, and it tickled my inquisitiveness. So first of all, I have to say that I'd really like to hear from Sue Hannon, who's the chairman of the Manchester Education Association, and from Maxine Mosley, who I think is vice president. I'm sorry, Maxine, I know we have had you on here, and I don't know what your title is, but the two people who represent the MEA at the school board meetings every time they're on are Sue Hannon, the president, and Maxine Mosley. So this idea that the union was pushing grievances against school administrators. So I went and did some inquiries, and of course, sadly, like many things, everything from the rape of the kid at West High School a number of years ago, to the sacking of the West High School principal before that, to the principal of Webster Elementary School being put on administrative leave, to a middle school teacher at I think it was at Parkside, but I'm not sure, about 4 years ago or something, who was suspended for a period, or whatever the word is. If I'm using the wrong words, I don't mean to, put on administrative leave. So too much stuff in Manchester happens behind the veil, and we don't really know what's going on. So I sought to find out this week about what was really going on, and it turns out, from the information I have, and I'm happy to be contradicted, I usually have pretty good sources, but people locked up on me and didn't want to discuss this because it's not in the public domain. But it seemed to me that while teachers are not getting paid, and that there's a dispute going on, a contract, that there is no, they're not under any contract, and there's misinformation everywhere about works to rule, and about homecoming not happening, and about lots of different things happening in our district, that while all of this is going on, and we're not seeing people, blocking Elm Street. There's no tractor trailers from the Teamsters Union parked across the Granite Street Bridge saying pay our 1,200 or 1,000 employees. Plus, there are other. Lynn Standish was on talking from the assistants union at a meeting last week, and Lynn, who used to take, another Hillside lady who's now at the district, I think. We're not seeing the fire in their eyes on this topic, and instead of that, it turns out that, from my information, that these people are busily attacking administrators, fighting for teachers who, whatever the details of them, I don't know, but fighting grievances of one kind or another. And I'm thinking, so that's what you're spending your time doing? This is what our administration's doing. If I was a Manchester teacher, and I found out that my instead of going out and doing their job and actually representing the teachers and putting forward the facts about where the teachers are in the city of Manchester. Instead of that, they are privately, and I don't mean they want to be secret about it, but on the back end, what they're doing is out there, throwing brickbats over the wall at school administrators who are trying to do their job. I can't wait to. I will talk to Sue and Maxine, and I've had them on before, and they always have a forum here. I'd love to hear from them. I am appalled that this is what's going on. But the stories that I was told this week about how while sort of, talk about Nero fiddling while Rome burns. I was at the open house at Central this past week, and I was grateful that somebody from the MEA had actually printed out a trifold, piece that had some information on it about class sizes and some statistics. But I have to tell you, and I don't mean to be petty or mean here, but when I looked at the trifold, if I were a dues-paying union member, I'd be like, why? First of all, why are we not seeing this information, more detailed and writ more large than it is here? Secondly, the trifold. I said I don't want to be petty, but if a seventh or eighth grade student was given a project to do, or even a sixth grade student was given a project to do, and they brought back that trifold with the font in different sizes and different fonts and stuff, difficult to read, and no graphics, and this would have been like a B effort. And I got to tell you, if you were in a marketing class at one of our high schools, it would have been a D or below, and in business it would have been unacceptable. And I don't know how much money the AMEA has, and I have no idea what the annual income is over there, but get yourself a flipping artist of some kind. Get yourself a statistician. I know I was at Conval High School 2 weeks ago, and I was talking to somebody there, and the athletic director at Conval High School, they have an athletic director, and the athletic director has an administrative assistant. Can you believe that? They have like 700 students. We don't even have an athletic director. We had a half-time athletic director for the city, and then our athletic director for instance, at Central High School is a guidance counsellor, so that's his full-time job. He also gets to be the school athletic director, and he has no help from anybody. And so I would do a comparison. I would say, look at what they have in Bedford and Wyndham and Rochester and Derry and pick your high schools. I don't care which ones. You don't have to cherry pick them. And say, do you have an athletic director? Yes, they do. We don't have any in Manchester. Why not? Put that on your leaflet, MEA. Give people the information that they need so they can stick their fingers in the chests of school board members and Board of Mayor and Alderman people and say, get your act together and fund our schools properly and give the teachers the contract they deserve. And also, if I were a school teacher in the city of Manchester, I'd be sticking my fingers in the chests of the teachers union and say, you guys need to stop the inside the beltway politics, get off your duff and get out there and fight for teachers. I want to see you guys fighting. What are you getting paid for? Why did you take the job if you're not going to do it? I'm not a happy person tonight. I'm going to follow up on this because I'm appalled that while we're out here and I'm fighting for teachers to get what they want, I have a leadership that I hear now in the teachers union that is spending more time trying to tear down people and throw stones at people on the back end than they are fighting the actual people in this city who are keeping our schools in the position that they're in. That should stop, and it should stop now. I'm fired up about it. I would like it to stop. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for another night. It's been a pleasure. I'll see you in a week. All the best now. Bye-bye.